In 2020, because of COVID-19, traveling is out, but there's no reason you can't meet old and make new friends at an Agile conference. The Scrum Master Toolbox podcast teamed up with Tom Henriksen to organize the 4th year of the Agile Online Summit, and you can attend for free. There will be networking events, lots of talks on important topics, and 8 amazing keynotes from Mary Poppendick to Alan Holub, Jeff Patton, who's the creator of user story mapping, Neil Killick, who's a no estimates pioneer, Jeff Watts, author of Scrum Mastery, a great book for Scrum Masters, Jeff Gotthelf, Bob Galen, and our very own Markus Hammarberg, who's the author of the Bungsu Story, a great Agile transformation story. You can get your free tickets at bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. All lowercase, all one word. Once again, bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. All lowercase, all one word, and the link is also on the show notes. You can get your free ticket or opt for the full digital access that lets you keep all the conference videos forever. And for example, organize Agile learning sessions at work by watching those videos. You can get the full digital access at bit.ly/SMAOS 2020. But don't forget, there will be lots of live networking events, so I'll see you at the conference floor. Hello everybody, welcome to our TGIF episode with Arjay. Hey Arjay, welcome back.
Hey there, Vasco. How are you doing?
I'm good. Obviously a bit distracted, given that
it's Friday.
that lapse that just went. All right, but it is Friday, so we're taking it easy. And today, literally, as we record this, it really is Friday, so it feels like Friday even.
It does.
So, Arjay, on Fridays, we want to explore product owners, our relationship with product owners, and also how we help product owners succeed and help them help the team succeed. But in order to do that, we need to understand what we're up against, right? What are the things we should be aware of? And that's where we start today. We start with what might have been potentially the worst product owner anti-pattern that you've had to work with.
Oh my goodness, yes. So before I jump into talking about just the one, because this one case I want to tell you about, it involves a couple, maybe 2 or 3. And then I also have some examples of a really great product owner. But the anti-patterns, I break them into 4 big groups. And this sounds like very canned kind of response, but it's because this is something I believe in, and actually a workshop that I'm trying to develop. And it's this concept of the 4 product owners you meet in hell. And
I like that.
So I've just picked these names at random again. So Mike, the micromanager, he wants to touch every edge case. He wants to respond to every single problem. He secretly wants to be a developer. There's Christine, the customer slave. She's the person who never says no. She has no vision. She's just basically a pipeline from the customer or your stakeholders straight to the team. Doesn't filter anything, doesn't prioritize anything. Then there's Big Bang Bob. He has a vision, and it's all going to be delivered all at once in about a year.
And always a year. 3 months into it, it's 1 year to go.
And it's always a year. Why? It's always a year. And then finally, Victor the visionary. He has the most potential because he has a vision, but it's all in his head, and he's completely unable to articulate it to the team. Nobody knows what his vision is. He knows what it is, though. And by golly, he's going to make sure it gets done. So those are the 4 kind of anti-patterns. And I bet listeners could come up with several others, but those are the 4 that I've encountered the most frequently. But in terms of my worst product owner, I kind of touched on this person earlier about, a self-destructive team. I'm going to call him Tom. And he suffered from 2 of the major flaws. He knew the system extremely well. So he would always get down into the code, and he was always solutioning. And he was a stakeholder yes man. He would always just say yes. So his first response was always, whether it could be done, or it was never could it be done. It was just do it. It was never whether it should be done, which is kind of a sense of lack of vision and also just being a yes man. He was just do it. And so when people would ask for things, he would just commit to it without ever even stepping back and giving it to the team, using your team's kind of group think to come up with what is the best solution. So he was missing out on that great opportunity, which is to step back and define the problem. And it goes back to, again, all the way back to Roman Pitzler's concept of, your customer doesn't need a drill, they need a 1/4-inch hole. Well, Tom would always come up with a way to give them the best drill possible. So, he always actually, every time the customers would come to him or stakeholders would ask a question, you could almost feel it. He took it as a personal challenge about how he could come up with it. So his answer was always, I can do it. And he would be excited. Yeah, we can do that. We can get it done I bet we can get it done this sprint. I might even work on it on my own, which is all of those things, everything I just said.
Even if it did not need to be done, right?
Yeah, even if it didn't need to be done, why is a product owner in there messing around in the code, and why isn't he letting the team work on it? So
that's actually a very good point. And of course, in many teams, especially technology-driven teams, product owners end up being ex-developers, right? Could be that they were ex-testers too, but many ex-developers end up as product owners, and perhaps they resent that and want to go back to the code. But one thing that happens though is that we lose the insight that comes from someone who doesn't really care about the technology. They just care about solving problems. And it sounds to me that this Tom that you were just describing, he cared more about the technology than he cared about the problems he was solving.
You nailed it right on the head. That is exactly what the problem was. And that leads to, no trust on the team, terrible, kind of a corrosive behavior for just that sense of team unity and the sense of delivering something to delight your customer. Breaks all of the principles basically, and it all so that he could have the short-term glory of telling the customer yes, and then kind of stroking his ego that I can do it still as a developer.
So I know that you told us the story on Tuesday about how the team broke up and eventually all the developers disappeared. But today's the product owner episode. So we need to kind of go back, take the time machine and ask you, what would you do now if you were back in that situation?
Actually, I would just do what I did do, but more emphatically. And that was, and it is a bit of an anti-pattern from a Scrum Master perspective, but whenever I was able to convince him to use story cards and really sit down and with the team and say, I know, Tom, you came to us with this solution. We're going to rewrite that story. I know you feel like we don't have time, but we're going to rewrite it as a problem statement. And, it's going all the way back to basics. And it does seem a little bit overly prescriptive from a Scrum Master perspective, but it's whenever we did that, the team members got rejuvenated. They got a sense of, hey, I'm actually involved. It drove him crazy when we did it because he knew the solution. He knew all the steps. He just wanted to just write the code. Why won't everybody just do what I tell them? But whenever we did rewrite the story from a problem statement card, and then we'd have some long, awkward silences because the team members had gotten so used to him telling them what to do, they didn't jump right in and come up with solutions or come up with good questions around acceptance criteria. But if we took the time, you could see the cards build up. You could see the team members begin to understand the code base better and understand what they were actually building towards. It forced him to actually talk about his vision. And we would have these kind of brief periods, maybe 1 or 2 sprints of, hey, things look like they're getting back on track. And then, in Tom's defense, he was a reflection of his leadership as well. And so he would lose his patience and say, forget it. This is taking too long. Sure, the team's getting good and sure, we're doing better, but I've got to deliver X, Y, and Z right now because the customers are asking for it. And so
that's the key, right? Isn't it? It's like, I've got to deliver. It's not the team needs to deliver.
Yeah.
Like, I got to
deliver.
deliver.
You really picked up on that. Yeah, that was exactly the language that he would use is I've got to deliver it. And it's like, we're a team. So,
and also it's the only way to ensure future deliveries is to get the team on board and be part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he missed out on a lot of that. But I have an example of somebody who was positive, and it was like basically the opposite of everything I just described. But
well, let's dive into that right now. So share with us, Arjay, what would have been perhaps the best product owner you've ever worked with, and how did they behave?
Sure. So, I described those four negatives, the four product owners you meet in hell, and then there's the one product owner that you hope to meet in heaven. And that I balanced Beatrice. It's balanced, right? Pays attention to detail when necessary, always has an articulated vision, always is working on it, and is always earning revenue with small releases, and knows their customers' goals better than even they know themselves, which that's implies all sorts of kind of customer relationship. And actually, this wasn't a female. This person was also a male product owner, and he didn't even want to be a product owner, and maybe that had something to do with it. But we'll call him Jack. Jack asked questions constantly. He was very self-aware. He was a former engineer who had been thrust into this position as product owner for this product. It was actually a project, and he was self-aware enough that when he knew he was getting down into the weeds, he needed to pull himself back out. And because he was so inquisitive, that was actually very hard. But he was cognizant of the fact that it's hard for him, so I need to be watchful to stay out of the code base. And he wasn't perfect at first, and maybe that's because he came into it sort of more of a blank slate, not with any preconceived notions. So he constantly asked questions about what he should be doing as a product owner, and he took suggestions so well. I'd say things like, you need to make sure everyone's clear about your vision. And he took that and took it so much further than the way I just described it. He provided a clear vision to of all the individual pieces of the project, and ultimately how it built towards the overall success state of the full project, not just the pieces, how it all tied together. And this avoiding thrash and churn by giving people that clear sense of where they were going and why they were doing it.
And it sounds to me that he was also able to kind of help people picture what success looked like.
Yeah, and it goes all the way back to the Stephen Denning book I was talking about. And I don't know if you've read much of Stephen Denning, but he does focus on storytelling quite a lot. That how important it is to inspire people, and if you can give people a sense of vision, possibly using a metaphor or possibly maybe drawing it out, whatever you got to do to get people on board, you're going to have more inspired people involved. So yeah, he and some people are just cut that way. Some people aren't. Some people have to kind of learn it and force themselves into it. But others, some people, that's just the way they grew up, or the way, the way they've always gotten through life is to tell stories or get people to envision exactly what's happening.
And for me, it also shows how when we work together with the product owner, right, and help the product owner focus on those things you just said, right? Be self-aware. Am I going too far into the details, especially if I'm an ex-developer or architect or whatever that might have been? If we help the product owner verbalize their vision, because everybody's got a vision, sometimes they just don't tap into it, right?
Right.
And of course, from the outside, you can't see the vision that anyone has, so it has to be verbalized. So helping them verbalize that, maybe with, as you said, storytelling and inspiring metaphors for the teams that they work with. If we can help the product owners do that, and it's not impossible, but if we can help it, they're going to be much better product owners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to take some credit, but really it had to do a lot with his drive and his imagination. Jack was really good about working with the customers and the stakeholders involved in the project. And so because he spent so much time with them, he was able to pull together and this was stakeholders from all different aspects of the company. This was a project that was, an enterprise project, and he would get information from all the different stakeholders, and he would pull that together and then come up with a clear articulation of what was needed. And basically, he was designing. This sounds kind of a little soft and squishy, but he was designing a metaphor that crossed all the platforms and crossed all of the orgs. And so, because he had that, he was able to come up with ways to delight the customers. He had this steady supply of improvements that he could picture within the project. And he was always thinking about, okay, who is this going to make happy? And if they had told him about another problem they were having, he would tell them how that problem might be solved by this project, or sometimes tell him that won't be solved in this project, but here's what I can give you, which that's something that can't be taught either. That's a person who knows how to work with others. And some people are just kind of naturally born to being, team players, but also in just delighting customers. So there's two pieces to that, though, because it kind of exponentially builds on itself, or snowballs, right? If you're helping your customers achieve their goals, it's going to delight them, and it makes him look good. And the more he looks good, the more they're willing to share with him, and he can get more insight into what they need. And it just keeps building on itself. So he was able to really come up with, good pieces of the project, get it delivered, break it into small pieces, and get some delight constantly flowing, kind of that constant drip of delight, rather than waiting for something, that big bang that can occur at the end of the project. He was always trying to get it out there.
And people stop believing in, right?
Right, exactly. And so because he'd get this constant flow of delight, it was a win-win. You'd get a little more leeway if something failed. Everybody's kind of like, that's okay. You know what? You've been delighting me for the last 6 months. Whatever. Sure, you failed this sprint. That's okay. Just keep it coming. And it just worked really well. And the craziest thing about the guy was there wasn't any specific tool, but the thing that really drove him was the data. You'd think it would be all around customer delight and customer feedback. Part of it was that, but it was around the data, because what got him really excited was, sure, customers were happy, and yes, we were delivering very steadily and more predictably, but because he could see the data about that got him really invested in kind of the Scrum model. He was like, he could see burn down, he could see throughput, he understood confidence interval and kind of predictability and why it was so important. And he knew that it was based on him having a clearly articulated vision and breaking the work into smaller pieces. So it just kept feeding back on itself.
That's awesome. It's a very inspiring story too, Arjay.
Thank you. Yeah, I miss that guy too. I don't work with him anymore.
Maybe you should give what was the
Jack.
name? Jack.
I need to give Jack
a call.
Yes. I might tell him, hey man, you got to listen to this podcast because I'm talking about you.
Absolutely. Arjay, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end. But before we go, do share with our listeners, where can they find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, actually, I have a blog. It's so agile, it hurts sometimes. And unfortunately, I've let it kind of go fallow the last year. I think I only have 2 posts in the last year, but I'm getting back to it. It's at goscrumgo.com. And so I do write about some of these things there, and in fact, that wheel of life, that wheel tool, is somewhere buried within the blogs there. But yeah, that's really the main place you can get a hold of me there, or you can email me. I don't know if you want me to give out my email, but
well, if you want to share it, just send it over to me. I'll put it in the show notes for people to get in touch for sure.
Yeah, I will. I'll put that in the link to the blog there.
Absolutely. Arjay, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you very much for having me, Vasco. This was just kind of it's just really nice kind of retrospective on a lot of the things I've done over the last couple decades. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.